Major Payne once had America laughing out loud at the sergeant who was so strict he somehow became lovable. But 30 years later, the fate of its cast has taken chilling turns no one ever saw coming, from sudden deaths and shattered marriages to brutal accidents that ended entire careers. Every one of them paid a painful price for the fame they earned. Join us, and you'll see that life behind the camera is anything but peaceful. Damon Wayans as Major Benson Payne. Damon Wayans, born on September 4, 1960 in New York City at 35 years old, he played Major Benson Payne, a strict, unbreakable Marine commander whose harsh discipline became the comedic engine of Major Payne, 1995. It was a role he not only starred in, but co-wrote and produced, shaping the entire film around his sharp, unconventional humor. Yet behind the uniform and confidence was a marriage collapsing under pressure. Wayans married Lisa Thorner in 1984, but the demands of fame created a home life filled with emotional distance, financial anxiety, and frequent arguments about time, loyalty, and parenting. Their disputes intensified as his career rose. Thorner struggled with his constant travel, and he struggled with the weight of providing for an ever-expanding Wayans family dynasty. The breaking point came in 2000, a devastating divorce after 16 years, followed by a painful custody battle over their 4 children that left him emotionally raw. The aftermath of that divorce bled into his health. Wayans spent years juggling work pressure with the guilt of a fractured family, and the stress contributed to chronic back injuries that forced him to quit Lethal Weapon in 2019. Worse, emotional overeating and insomnia pushed his body toward collapse, leading to a type 2 diabetes diagnosis in 2013. Doctors warned him that if he didn't drastically change his lifestyle, he risked losing his eyesight or a limb. He even shed 45 kilograms. Even career victories like In Living Color and The Last Boy Scout carried scars, each milestone shadowed by what he felt he failed to protect at home. Today, Wayans is 65 years old and still working, now co-starring with his son Damon Wayans Jr. in Papa's House, trying to rebuild the family closeness he once lost. He performs stand-up selectively, prioritizing his health after recurring complications from diabetes. His estimated net worth of $35 million reflects decades of writing, producing, and acting Karyn Parsons as Emily Walburn. Karyn Parsons, born October 8, 1966 in Los Angeles, California. At 29 years old, he played Emily Walburn, the gentle, grounded school psychologist who softens Payne's hardened exterior in Major Payne. The role helped Parsons break free from the spoiled princess image of Hilary Banks in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, offering her a rare chance to reshape her career. But behind that soft smile was a life filled with twists that few fans ever saw coming. After the enormous success of The Fresh Prince, Parsons entered Major Payne with hopes of revitalizing her trajectory. But her first marriage to actor Randy Brooks had already left deep scars. The age gap, conflicting career goals, and constant pressure from fame led to relentless arguments. As Parsons found herself increasingly typecast as the pretty girl in the background, frustration seeped into her home life. The 1990 divorce shattered her trust in relationships and pushed her into work as a way to escape. Just when she seemed to be recovering, Parsons faced another crisis after Major Payne. The big roles stopped coming. She tried writing, producing, and even directing, but Hollywood was unforgiving to women of color over 30. This disappointment triggered chronic anxiety, sleepless nights, and long periods of self-doubt. She gradually disappeared from television. She turned down major projects simply because she no longer wanted to pretend to be someone else. A turning point came when she married director Alexandra Rockwell in 2003, but this second marriage brought its own hardships. While Rockwell poured everything into indie films, Parsons struggled to raise their two young children in a cramped Brooklyn apartment. Money was tight. Career opportunities had dried up, and she later admitted that there were moments she felt completely forgotten by Hollywood. Yet in the darkest part of that struggle, Parsons created Sweet Blackberry, an animated project celebrating unsung black heroes. It became both her lifeline and her rebirth. Today, at 59 years old, Karyn Parsons lives more peacefully as the founder and director of the Sweet Blackberry Foundation, bringing pieces of history to millions of children. She occasionally appears in independent films or in her husband's projects. Her estimated net worth, around $1.5 to $2 million, is modest compared to her peers, but it reflects a life rebuilt by purpose rather than fame. Orlando Brown as Cadet Kevin Tiger Dunn. Orlando Brown was born on December 4, 1987, in Los Angeles, California. At just 8 years old, he played Kevin Tiger Dunn, a shy but brave cadet in Major Payne, 1995, a role so charming that it instantly marked him as one of Hollywood's most promising child actors. It was his first real taste of fame, and for a moment, it seemed he was destined to become Disney's next golden star. But behind that bright smile was a childhood racing toward a storm no one could have predicted. After rising through Family Matters and especially That's So Raven, 2003 to 2007, Orlando seemed unstoppable. Yet fame came too fast, too early, and without any real protection. When he left Disney in 2007, everything began to collapse. Failed auditions turned into frustration. Frustration turned into drugs, and addiction pulled him down like a bottomless pit. In 2007, he was arrested for marijuana possession. By 2016, methamphetamine had entered the picture. The pressure of losing major roles, losing income, and losing the structure Disney once provided pushed him into chaotic spirals, one of the darkest being the viral Dr. Phil interview in 2018. Where he claimed he was Michael Jackson's son and the father of 4 unknown children. His marriage couldn't escape the storm either. Although he married Danielle Brown and had a son, Orlando carried addiction and mental instability into the relationship, triggering explosive arguments. At one point, he was arrested outside his brother's house, holding a hammer and a broken knife blade, accused of threatening him. The same brother who had taken Orlando in to keep him from living in a shelter. Eventually, they separated, leaving behind wounds neither wanted to reopen. Orlando's career fell apart alongside his personal life. New roles disappeared. Casting calls stopped coming. He slipped from being a beloved Disney star to being homeless, addicted, and surviving only through the kindness of his brother. Now, Orlando Brown is 38 years old and continues trying to make a comeback, appearing in small projects, sometimes live streaming about faith, other times disappearing into long stretches of silence. His net worth is estimated at only $2,000, nearly wiped out by arrests and treatment costs. William Hickey as Dr. Phillips. William Hickey, born on September 19, 1927 in Brooklyn, New York. At 68 years old, Hickey played Dr. Phillips, a bizarre, butterfly-obsessed school principal whose dry, macabre humor added an unforgettable tone to Major Payne, 1995. It was one of the final roles of his long, uneven career, but behind that voice was a lifetime of quiet suffering. Hickey had been acting since childhood, yet he spent most of his early career broke, exhausted, and overlooked, surviving long Broadway nights with a flask hidden behind the sink at HB Studio. He loved teaching, but it wasn't a passion born of stability. It was the only steady income he had. He admitted he often drank just to tolerate the bad acting when he was a teacher. His personal life carried its own heartbreak. Hickey never married and never started a family. Instead, he lived quietly with his close companion, Lily Funches, who cared for him in his final years. Friends said Hickey battled an overwhelming sense of emotional isolation that leftover wound from a childhood spent in poverty. While other actors his age were winning awards and leading films, Hickey was still auditioning for scraps, still fighting for recognition. Ironically, his biggest success arrived in 1985 at age 57, when his chilling performance as Don Corrado Prizzi in Prizzi's honor earned him an Academy Award nomination. But the joy was short-lived. The roles that followed, from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation to his iconic voice role in The Nightmare Before Christmas, were celebrated. Yet Hickey's health was quietly crumbling behind the scenes. Heavy smoking, stress, and decades of living on the edge took a brutal toll on his lungs. By 1997, while filming Better Than Ever, Hickey's body could no longer keep up. He died on June 29, 1997, at age 69, from emphysema and bronchitis. His net worth was only around $1 million, a small sum for a man who had given Hollywood more than it ever returned. He was laid to rest in the cemetery of the Evergreens in Brooklyn. Albert Hall as General Decker. Albert Hall, born on November 10, 1937, in Brighton, Alabama, entered Major Payne at 58 years old. At that age, Hall played General Decker, a calm, steady military superior who guides Payne toward civilian life in Major Payne, 1995. His composed presence reflected decades of experience in authoritative roles. Behind that calm persona, Hall's private life was far more fragile. Married to a non-celebrity wife since the 1960s, their relationship endured long periods of separation as Hall scraped for roles and traveled constantly. During the filming of Apocalypse Now, long nights of phone calls with his wife were filled with guilt because he was away for months while she raised 2 children alone. The emotional strain seeped into his professional choices. Hall often accepted small roles simply to support his family, and the frustration of never breaking into leading man status caused recurring arguments and brief physical breakdowns. During Ali, 2001, he appeared withdrawn after difficult calls with his wife about growing medical bills and the loneliness of aging parents. Now, Hall is 88 years old. He has retired quietly from acting, choosing a reclusive life away from the industry that both elevated and exhausted him. His estimated net worth of around $2 million reflects a lifetime of steady, but often underappreciated work. Michael Ironside as Lieutenant Colonel Stone. Michael Ironside, born on February 12, 1950, in Toronto, Canada. At 45 years old, Ironside played Lieutenant Colonel Stone, a fierce, alcoholic stepfather figure whose intensity added a sharp edge to Major Payne, 1995. This role left a surprisingly sharp imprint thanks to that cold stare and signature menace only Ironside could deliver. Few knew that behind those few unforgettable minutes on screen was a man who had spent his entire life fighting Ironside's career took off with Scanners, 1981, where his terrifying portrayal of a ruthless telepath made Hollywood take notice. But behind those powerful villain roles was a man worn down by a marriage stretched thin and a work schedule that consumed everything. His marriage to Karen Lee Greco in 1986 began beautifully, but as he jumped from film to film, arguments, misunderstandings, and quiet loneliness crept into the relationship. Karen wanted stability. Ironside was chained to Hollywood. The emotional strain sometimes followed him onto set, costing him opportunities for bigger roles. The pressure from his career and the tension at home came with a brutal price. Ironside didn't battle just one cancer. He survived 3 colon cancer, prostate cancer, and thyroid cancer. All came for him, one after another. There were days when he went straight from chemotherapy to the set of an action movie because he feared being replaced. Crew members recalled moments when he leaned against a wall to stay upright before stepping into character. His work in Total Recall, 1990, and Starship Troopers, 1997, was filmed during some of the hardest periods of his health, yet audiences never saw the pain, only the steel. After 2000, his career suffered another devastating blow when the sci-fi series Ice Planet, which he had signed a 5-year contract for, was canceled before production truly began. The collapse of the project sent him into a financial and emotional spiral. Still, he held on by reinventing himself, lending his deep volcanic voice to Darkseid and Sam Fisher, roles that quietly saved him during his darkest years. Today, at 75 years old, Michael Ironside is still working, but moving slower and more carefully after the illnesses that nearly killed him. He lives quietly in Los Angeles, devoting more time to family and choosing only projects that have personal meaning. With an estimated net worth of $6 million, Ironside isn't wealthy by Hollywood standards, but he's rich in a way few are. A man who has faced death 3 times and is still standing Bam Bigelow as huge biker. Scott Charles Bigelow, born September 1st, 1961 in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. At 34 years old, he played the massive biker hired to take Payne down, a role that perfectly weaponized his 180-kilogram frame and flame-tattooed persona in Major Payne. But behind that intimidating image was a man shaped by violence, addiction, and a lifetime of instability. As a teenager, he spiraled into crime, armed robbery, assault, drug possession, leading to 9 months at the Albert C. Wagner Youth Facility. When he finally clawed his way into professional wrestling in 1985 at the Monster Factory, the industry embraced his monstrous look, but never eased his demons. His rise in WrestleMania 11 brought fame, yet the pressure, injuries, and constant touring only deepened the cracks in his personal life. His long-term relationship collapsed under drug abuse and financial ruin, leaving him emotionally isolated and dependent on painkillers to keep performing. The chaos accelerated in the 2000s. Bankruptcy, legal troubles, and a 2005 Harley-Davidson crash that left him bloodied while his girlfriend, who later discovered his body, barely survived addiction, became the undertow dragging every part of his life. From fading offers after ECW and WCW to the chronic pain that forced him onto disability benefits. Even his achievements, headlining WrestleMania 11 or holding the ECW World Heavyweight Championship, could not erase loneliness and physical destruction haunting him daily. Sadly, he died at just 45 years old on January 19, 2007, found face down in his Florida home after a lethal combination of cocaine and benzodiazepines with advanced heart disease listed as a contributing factor. The medical examiner ruled it an accident, though everything in his final years pointed to a man worn out long before fate caught up. At the time of his death, his net worth had dwindled to roughly $500,000, a stark reminder of how addiction and chronic injuries had consumed the fortune he once commanded in the ring. Mark W. Madison as Cadet Fox. Mark W. Madison was born on March 7, 1977 in Petersburg, Virginia. At 18 years old, he played Cadet Fox, a hearing-impaired but gifted marksman in Major Payne, 1995. A role that showcased his natural vulnerability and hinted at a talent Hollywood never gave the chance to grow. For Madison, the role became both a highlight and a lifelong reminder of the promise he once held, but was never able to fully pursue. Yet after the cameras stopped rolling, life offered him none of the chances Hollywood gives its favorites. Major Payne was his first and last major role. Casting calls dried up and industry connections faded. Returning home to Petersburg, he worked small local jobs while battling the disappointment of a career that had ended before it began. The financial instability and emotional pressure of an abruptly derailed future shadowed him for years. Sadly, he died at just 40 years old on May 23, 2017, in Petersburg under undisclosed medical circumstances, a sudden passing that left those who remembered him stunned. His estimated net worth at the time, around $100,000, reflected a modest life far removed from Hollywood glamour. Chris Owen as Cadet Wooliger. Chris Owen was born on September 25, 1980, in Michigan. At 15 years old, he appeared in Major Payne, 1995, as Cadet Wooliger, the frail, allergy-ridden boy who added an awkward humor that made the squad strangely endearing. That small role quietly opened Hollywood's doors for him, planting the seed for the Shermanator identity that would later follow him for decades. But behind that comedic image was a young actor walking straight into emotional strain. His marriage to Michelle Beck in 2007 began with genuine hope, yet the pressures of fading fame soon turned their home into a quiet battleground. When the American Pie franchise declined, the financial weight grew heavier and the stress seeped into their relationship until the divorce in 2012 pushed him into a mild depression. It was a dark period that robbed him of momentum and left him clinging to sporadic roles just to prove he was still worth hiring. Those marital cracks echoed directly into his career, forcing him to take whatever small parts he could. Guest roles in Criminal Minds, background spots in music videos, and even working as a sushi waiter in Santa Monica to stay afloat. The humiliation burned, but it also kept him fighting, refusing to disappear completely like so many teen actors of his era. Today, Chris Owen is 45 years old and still taking scattered roles while rebuilding life with his second wife, Dana Cousins. His net worth, around $400,000, reflects both the long tail of American Pie royalties and the financial turbulence he survived Stephen Martini as Cadet Alex Stone. Stephen Martini was born on June 17, 1975, in New York City. At 20 years old, he stepped into Major Payne, 1995, as Cadet Alex Stone, the rebellious teen who transformed from troublemaker to unexpected team leader. The role gave him early visibility, but more importantly, it proved he could carry emotional weight on screen, a skill that later shaped his path as a writer and composer. Yet Stephen's private life was never as steady as his creative ambitions. The pressure to stand out in Hollywood pushed him into one intense relationship after another, each unraveling under the weight of financial insecurity and constant work. While producing Smiling Fish and Goat on Fire with only $5,000 to their name, he and his partner at the time faced mounting arguments over bills, schedules, and sacrifices. The imbalance between artistic dreams and daily survival created a cycle of emotional exhaustion that haunted him through every new screenplay. Those cracks deepened when he began writing Lyme Life, a film inspired by the real Lyme disease that affected someone close to him. The process pulled Stephen back into old memories and unresolved guilt, straining his romantic relationships even more. Now, Stephen Martini is 50 years old, still active as a writer, composer, and musician. His estimated net worth of $1 million comes from independent filmmaking, scoring, and decades of creative endurance. He focuses on music under the Spaceship Martini name, living a quieter, introspective life shaped by both the triumphs and the heartbreaks that have followed him since his first days on set, George Chung as Viet Cong soldier. George Kee Chung was born on February 8, 1949, in Hong Kong. At 46 years old, he appeared in Major Payne, 1995, as a brief but memorable Viet Cong soldier, a small role that added authenticity to Payne's exaggerated war flashbacks. That moment, although short, reinforced his status in Hollywood as one of the most reliable, stunt-trained Asian character actors of his era. But behind the dozens of effortless martial arts roles was a man carrying quiet, lifelong exhaustion. Years of balancing stunt work with acting strained his marriage in ways few outsiders ever saw. Long shoots, constant injuries, and the insecurity of typecasting created emotional distance at home, leading to arguments over stability and safety. This tension often shadowed his career, even during respected appearances in Rambo, First Blood, Part 2, and Under Siege. As the industry continued to cast him narrowly, the stress manifested physically. Repetitive stunt injuries, long nights on set, and the emotional burden of stalled artistic ambition gradually wore him down. The struggle to maintain a stable marriage while juggling the demands of Hollywood left him isolated. sometimes questioning whether his decades of work had ever truly been seen. Even as he landed roles in RoboCop 2, Rush Hour, and lent his voice to Wei Chung in Grand Theft Auto 5, the lingering pain of personal sacrifice was something no camera ever captured. Today, George Chung is 76 years old and mostly retired, occasionally appearing at industry events and lending his experience to younger stunt performers. His estimated net worth of $2 million reflects a lifetime of relentless work across film, television, and voice acting. Michael Gable as Lieutenant Wiseman. Michael Gable was born in 1965 in the United States. At 30 years old, he appeared in Major Payne, 1995, as Lieutenant Wiseman, the timid Wellington officer whose fear and awkwardness added a sarcastic punchline to Payne's brutality. The role gave him brief visibility in Hollywood, a fleeting spotlight that hinted at potential but never fully transformed into long-term stardom. Behind that small comedic role, however, Gable's life was marked by quiet emotional strain. Financial instability became a recurring argument at home, especially as auditions dried up and theater jobs paid inconsistently. That pressure followed him into his acting work, making each role feel like a test of survival. Even when he resurfaced years later in Sally Pachalok, 2015, the weight of domestic stress shadowed his performance. By the time he landed a minor appearance in Wonder Woman 1984, he was already fighting the silent burnout that comes from years of professional disappointment and personal tension. As the cracks in his marriage widened, Gable's artistic output slowed. The emotional exhaustion translated into physical symptoms, insomnia, anxiety, and long periods of inactivity that quietly pushed him further away from Hollywood. Small directing projects and local theater productions became his refuge, but the instability of the industry and the unresolved strain at home left him isolated and uncertain about the future. Now, Michael Gable is around 60 years old, living quietly and rarely appearing in front of cameras. He occasionally works behind the scenes in small theater circles, leaning on decades of experience, even as his pace has slowed. His estimated net worth of $500,000 reflects a career marked not by fame, but by resilience. 30 years have passed, but the truth behind the Major Payne cast is still as haunting as ever. Some rose, some fell, and some never made it past the shadows of their own success. But now the question is yours. Which story shocked you the most, and whose journey should we uncover next? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of Hollywood's untold stories. Untold.